let's see what this is about, shall we?
June is a month of a lot of things. Men's mental health awareness, Father's Day, but most corporations, they don't really care about either of those.
No.
And instead, they usually funnel all their resources to Pride related content because that's what they think really matters. You may have noticed that Pride this year has been a little muted compared to last year, which is
Oh, yeah.
unsurprisingly done on purpose. Due to
I can honestly say, I think I've only seen like maybe a handful or two of companies that are actually still doing this. It is very minuscule, the amount of companies that still support this. So as soon as you see this kind of like, I don't even know what to call it, like this downward slope of people that are, actually caring about supporting something like this. Once that goes away, so does these companies' interest in it, because once they realize they can't, monetize it or, gain some kind of profit from it, they don't give a shit anymore.
how pretty much everyone rejected Pride Month last year, and as you all likely know, RuneScape and old school RuneScape have also been staples of the MMO world since 2001. I remember playing RuneScape myself back in grade 7 because it could run on my parents' computer and
RuneScape.
even run on the school's computers too. I would log in, I would fish for lobsters, and then I would sell them.
You could run RuneScape on a rotten potato, okay? Let's be honest. I could probably run it on like a Game Boy or something if I really wanted to.
I even still remember when one guy tricked me and stole all of my armor, saying that he could trim it, and then he never gave it back to me. Dude, I was devastated. I think that's actually where my trust issues began. If that guy is watching this, by the way, I hope you hit your shin on something metal, because you ruined my day back then. Anyways, like I said, RuneScape is like digital comfort food for many because it's really grindy, it's full of nostalgia, and it's full of players who've been chopping down like virtual trees since dial up was a thing. Remember dial up internet? God, I'm old. And for years, Jagex, which owns and makes RuneScape, has leaned very, very hard into Pride Month specifically, with events like Tales of Pride and in-game marches where players rocked rainbow capes and like it was like a whole medieval pride parade for the entire month pretty much. To say that RuneScape was taken over by this ideology, that would be an understatement. The entire game just became a digital playground for these types of players. Some would even say it's been a safe space for LGBTQ plus gamers specifically. However, RuneScape hasn't
Eh,
been doing well for a really long time. As this Gamer Blurb article details, RuneScape has lost well over half its players over the years, and that's not by accident. According to them, since OSRS released in 2013, which stands for Old School RuneScape by the way, the current modern RuneScape that people call RuneScape 3 has been on a downward trend because nobody really cares about new RuneScape. And since old school came
yeah,
back,
because they
modern
treat their
RuneScape
player
actually
base like
lost about
shit.
57% of their players and have never really recovered since then. So RuneScape has had all kinds of problems over the years. They removed free trading, which was overwhelmingly met with negative reception, and
Yeah, let's just monetize every aspect of our game. Wait, what do you mean you guys are leaving? I don't understand. What do we do?
fans rallied to get it back in the game. They also added more modern gameplay enhancements to make RuneScape play more like World of Warcraft and such too. The game that you're seeing on screen right now is actually RuneScape Dragon Wilds, which is a co-op survival spin-off, if you will, of RuneScape. So the
Everything has
brand
a
is kind of
survival
evolving and
spinoff.
devolving all over the place. And people really just want RuneScape to be like it was well over a decade ago and then some. Actually, a good comparison is Dragon Quest. You know how fans of Dragon Quest want the games to stay old school no matter what? Well, RuneScape fans are pretty much the same. But like I said, they lost a lot of players due to all kinds of moronic decisions, and also there was this big push for LGBT plus content that was also not really helping anything and causing even more people to leave because the game no longer really felt like a fantasy world. It was just turning into a medieval.
Well, no, because when you start adding all these store pages and extra, like UI crap that takes you away from the game and onto some other store page or website or whatever, you break the immersion and it's no longer a game. It is just a digital marketplace to try to nickel and dime your players. Like, I think another good example is, oh God, what the hell is it? Star Citizen. It's nothing but a digital storefront. Like, there's very little game to be played. And RuneScape has very quickly turned into that, because there's, you've got battle passes for battle passes. You've got monthly subscriptions on top of monthly subscriptions. Then you've got your paid currency. Then you've got your straight up storefront where you can buy skins and everything else. It's ridiculous.
Evil digital version of like Portland or San Francisco with all the flags and stuff. So eventually the old CEO would leave, which is this guy on screen that you're seeing, and then he would hand the reins over to this much younger guy here that you're seeing, whose name is John Bellamy. He's Jagex's new CEO, who rolled into the position in around March 2025. Then, with April this year, this new CEO guy posted on Jagex's internal message board that there will be no more new Pride content for 2025, and people lost their minds. He instead...
That's right, guys. Jagex is very, very bigoted, and they're transphobic because they don't want Pride Month celebrated in their video game. You just remember that. So don't play their game, okay? It's only 80 years old, but it's still got a lot of stuff going for it, okay? But don't play their game. They're bigots.
Wanted to focus the game and Jagex on what players want and protect the company from those who would wish us harm. The translation is that he's scared of the anti-woke players who have completely decimated video games in 2023 and especially in 2024. So as you would expect, people were really pissed, and then Pink News had this article which stated that the new CEO was catering to American conservatism by not allowing new LGBT plus Pride content to be added to the...
To be fair, the amount of people that complain about all the woke stuff are the majority, not the minority. The minority is the couple of LGBT people that become like super extremists and try to scare you into pushing their, whatever agendas. But the majority of people, which is like your average Americans, your 9-to-5s, your Walmart Americans, all them, they don't give a shit about this stuff. They don't care one way or another. They just want to go home, play a damn game for a couple hours, and then have their wife, yell and scream at them while their kids hate on them too. That's all they want. They don't care about this crap. They are the majority.
The game in June, no less. So this Pink News article, as seen here, spoke to an anonymous employee who works on RuneScape. Although, as seen here in that same article, many employees working on the game have actually been pushing back. And they even leaked to places like Pink News that the new Pride-aligned content was actually already finished and ready to be implemented into the game, but the CEO's final approval was stopping it. And so the backlash reached a point internally that staff members were offering to finish the game themselves and implement these Pride content things on their own time, meaning that Jagex wouldn't even have to pay them for their work on the game to do this. So they were so hell-bent on ensuring that the Pride content was available during Pride Month that they were stopping at literally nothing to implement it. Apparently, this is also the first time this has ever happened, since last year the Pride story was players having to help a character named Rain, who would have to form like a Pride parade to be conducted in RuneScape's virtual world. Here's even a photo from 2023 showing how the game had full-blown transgender flags and more implemented into the game even then. According to Pink News, who spoke to these devs anonymously, many of them believe the reason why Pride 2025 was abandoned by Jagex's new CEO was because of Trump's anti-DEI laws that effectively removed and gutted many of the institutions that relied on government funding to exist in the first place. Because most of these movements, to the surprise of nobody, were generating little to no money or engagement organically. Instead, they needed funding constantly to exist, which just basically tells you that these things weren't being accepted or could really stand on their own 2 feet without a lot of help. Anyway, a reminder back in February 2025 as well, Trump's administration did tear US aid apart, and it was publicly stated that many of the institutions pushing that sort of content were being funded by American taxpayer money without Americans even knowing that their money was actually doing that. So yes, it was all a big issue. I covered this before already, but it proved that the LGBT explosion of content and initiatives were not being done organically. They were, like I and many others called out, they were in fact.
To be fair, people were already up in arms about all the DEI stuff, but then after the USAID stuff kind of came to light, it was almost like handing people the pitchforks and torches. So, I mean, it was just like, yes, everything that you were worried about was true. Well, most of it. Some of it. I don't know. But all of your tinfoil hat people were, they were very vindicated, let's just say that. So, but yeah, no, I mean, you had your anti-woke movement, and then you had your anti-DEI movement, and then now that's pretty much null and void, and now all these companies are starting to back away from it because there's no more profit in it, or because they realized it was a waste of money to begin with. And now that's why we're seeing all these amazing game trailers where it's just some big sweaty dude with a big giant sword killing people in bloody gory fashion, or really hot bitches that are whirling around with a sword or whatever, and now you're getting more attractive females. Now we can go back to playing good games, maybe. I hope.
Fact, actual real life propaganda that was being forced into everything. So while Jagex is not an American company, they're UK based in case you didn't know, their investors, however, are actually American based instead. Specifically, one investment group that kind of oversees them is called CVC Capital Partners, which is a private equity firm in Jersey. And they fund a large portion of RuneScape's operations and then some. So John Bellamy, that's the CEO of Jagex and RuneScape, he got so much backlash internally from employees that he had to have a Q&A with his workers to explain why he made this decision for the company. He said, as it reads here, Friday's communications very clearly caused
I wanted
distress.
money,
I want
guys.
to be clear, the decision for this is with me. I own it. I'm fully responsible for it. I published Friday's announcement with speed in mind, and this weekend's messages and questions made that clear. I understand that RuneScape is precious because it is a safe space. It is an escape from reality, and the reality we find ourselves in is changing. It is getting stranger, more troubling, less moral, I would argue. Games and studios are being canceled because of content that is perceived to be woke or representative. The pendulum is swinging back in a way we didn't expect. John's reasoning for this, as he says here, is to ensure the business is protected against those that would wish us harm.
And there it is. To ensure the business is protected. That is the main motto. In other words, the pendulum has shifted in the direction of money. That's all it is. Whatever's best for the company, whatever's going to make them look good to investors, that's what they're going to do. And since there's such a huge pushback against all this woke and DEI stuff, that's what they're going to do. They're going to follow the trend. Get over it. There's no sense in getting mad about it because guess what? You can bitch and moan and whine all you want, but as much as we bitch and moaned and whined about all the DEI and woke shit, it continued to happen until finally the government said, hey, we're not going to give you this money anymore. Oh, okay. Well, then we no longer care about that kind of stuff. All it is. I mean, pretty clear.
This is the difficult balance that Friday's decision was trying to find. The way that I communicated it missed the mark. While he did confirm that, pride parades are still allowed to happen in RuneScape despite this, he did feel a moral responsibility to protect the game's integrity, and he would say more, which is, the content is now controversial in a way it didn't used to be, and that controversy now brings more risk than it did previously. Risk that I'm personally responsible to protect against. So what John Bellamy is saying is that he can read between the lines. And he knows that if RuneScape continues down this path of pushing pro-LGBT content for the rest of time pretty much, they will, as in Jagex, fall apart and be completely destroyed by lack of players, money, and much more. As again, like the USA thing confirmed, most of this growth of these initiatives that were pro-LGBT were not organic, and were in fact
True.
propaganda that was disguised as empowerment. I think we should also come to the realization that this is a big reason why RuneScape, for example, has lost many of its players, because it has no longer become a place for escapism when you can really no longer escape the real world in that game anymore. RuneScape, like others, has over time become less a medieval fantasy world devoid of our real world politics, and has instead become a sanitized playground to push and indulge in pro DEI and LGBT stuff instead. It's sort of like how Dungeons and Dragons and many more are right now too. None of these spaces, they feel like escapism anymore. They've all instead just become extensions of real world politics and beliefs, which in my opinion, kind of completely defeats the purpose of what these games are meant.
When Dungeons and Dragons decided to retcon slavery and how they removed negative stat effects from ogres or orcs and started making official content for handicapped players, like wheelchairs in Dungeons and Dragons. This is some of the most ridiculous shit I've ever seen in my life. When I play Dungeons and Dragons, it is to escape into a different universe, or when I play video games, use it to escape reality. I don't want reality to follow me 2,000 years ago, because in my mind, when I think of fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons and all that kind of stuff, you look back at the time era that the story is supposed to take place, and if there was slavery back then, it should still be a part of that world in a fantasy setting. It doesn't mean that you support slavery. It doesn't mean that you're a racist. It just means that you are able to come to terms with it. It was a thing then, and it was a horrible thing, but you can still recognize that it's there. Just because you erase it from a history book doesn't take away the fact that it was still there. So trying to push this kind of stuff into fantasy type settings or places where it doesn't organically fit or, have a real meaning to the overall world or story or characters even, it is then forced on you and you're just supposed to sit there and accept it. That's what I have an issue with.
For, which is escapism, honestly, and not propaganda. However, now we got to talk about the RuneScape community, because they did not take this lying down at all. These are also the same people who recreated the Boston Tea Party in-game when Jagex hiked membership prices, which, no, I'm not kidding, that actually happened. Look at this. Like, seriously, American RuneScape players actually did that. I'm not lying. So when word got out about the CEO's decision, the internet kind of
I'm not
erupted
gonna lie,
in
it's pretty funny.
response. On Reddit, players coined the new phrase going around RuneScape, which was no gay, no pay. And they were flipping a homophobic slogan from 2017's Pride controversy into a protest badge instead. As seen here from PC Gamer, no gay, no pay, the RuneScape community is absolutely mauling Jagex's new CEO over his decision to cancel new Pride Month events. As one former RuneScape dev said, as seen here, this makes me really angry, cowardly, and disgusting. There's more too.
Oh. Here we go. You guys ready for the kicker on this one? Do you want to know the secret to this little piece right here? There it is, right there in front of you. Blue sky. Be very afraid. Don't ever take this seriously. There's your PSA for the day.
Another user blasted the CEO on Twitter saying, "Excuse me, Jagex, but what the hell is this, you absolute cowards? You dial back Pride content because you're scared of mean tweets from alt-right losers online, all while pretending to still be an ally. No one's falling for this." The comments in response were, well, hostile to say the least. One user would say back, "No one gives an F about your sex life. Keep it in the bedroom, you bundle of sticks." Another user would clap back also by saying, "It's 2025. Jagex does not have the spare cash to burn on catering to mentally ill men in dresses." And another user would say, "We are so back. Thank you, Trump." Yeah, you get the point. Pretty much, there's a very, very vocal group within RuneScape that is pro-LGBT and pride that is looking to cancel all their subscriptions to the game and pretty much is downright boycotting. But what those players are probably going to learn the hard way is that while they may be very vocal, they are, whether they like to admit it or not, still a minority of the general RuneScape population. And that clearly this CEO wouldn't have.
Exactly. They have finally catered to the majority, not the minority. That is where all these companies have went so astray. They have let this very small subset of people dictate how they run their company or their games. And now that they're falling away from it or stepping away from it, starting to realize that this is a very small minority.
Made the decisions that he did unless he had real tangible data and info given to him by the people who obviously analyze RuneScape's players, profits, and more on an internal level. The truth is this, okay? If this group of LGBT pro players were really as big as they claim to be, this CEO would never have said any of this because it would have been financial you know what if he did that. However, if you ask me, the fact that he did say this proves that he knows internally that there are frankly not enough of these kinds of players to sufficiently support and keep RuneScape alive on their beliefs or their subscriptions alone. And that the overwhelmingly majority of RuneScape players are in fact not pro-LGBT players. I would wager most of them actually avoid that sort of content too because it just doesn't interest them. Doesn't mean that they're bigots, they just don't want any part of that, and that's totally fine. But I think throwing around threats like this, it just kind of proves that not only is your group very vocal, but honestly, you're kind of disruptive too. Because companies do not just suddenly make decisions like this if the alternative would have been financial devastation for them. Jagex knows that while they may lose a majority of these LGBT pro players, that in the long run, their exodus from the game is probably not going to have much of an effect at all, pretty much, on Jagex's finances or anything like that. Reputation, okay, yeah, sure, because as we know, many people in the industry are obviously pro-LGBT, but however, if you ask me, I would wager that many of them are going to be pro-whatever, honestly, that keeps them employed. Because if there's anything I've seen and learned about game companies and such when it comes to covering them in these godforsaken videos, it's that actually the vast majority of these companies, they have no morals of their own. They just simply do whatever it is that will get that internet clout or, the virtual backpats from other developers. But clearly,
like do whatever it takes to get eyes on your company.
This push isn't making anything substantial happen for the game. Because he learned in real time that catering to a mob of small but very vocal players does not actually equal profits. And he also knows that in the long run, this will be good for the game. And even if you do disagree with it, you kind of know that it's true. Again, it's not like he's banning pride or LGBT stuff in the game forever. Pride parades can still happen in game. The flags and what
all they're doing is they're taking away the development time and energy and money it takes to, create this stuff in game, and they're spending it elsewhere. Why spend all this money and development time on something that is only for like a very small minority of people? You can scream as loud as you want, but if it's just a couple people screaming, what does it matter? Be like, okay, cool, okay, cool, all right. So anyways, that's all there is to it.
Whatever else that already exists in the game are not being removed. The point is that this pivot is needed to ensure that RuneScape and Jagex as a company survives the future. But these types would rather RuneScape become an actual ghost town than come to terms with reality. However, this hasn't stopped the employees and the DEI position ones to, push back. They wrote in an open letter, again, this is from Pink News, which says, "Dear Jagex executive team, we are writing to ask you to restart development on the new Pride content for 2025, and to make a commitment that Pride will continue to be an annual seasonal event in both Old School and RuneScape. We are all aware of the difficult political climate in gaming and the wider world. We understand that openly presenting ourselves as a diverse and inclusive company could be seen as a risk. However, as outlined below, the data from previous Pride events as well as the pronoun changes in Old School clearly shows that despite a vocal minority engaging in bigoted behavior online, this did not translate to a loss of revenue. We are writing to you because we believe in Jagex, we believe in our players, we believe that not
Oh
giving
my
into
God.
hate is the right decision for the business in the long term. So, according to the pro LGBT devs,
I can tell you exactly what the CEOs and the higher ups of this company did with that letter. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I see your point. You have a very good point. I understand. So anyways, that's their stance on it.
as a Jagex, these changes did not affect revenue. Although, clearly, Jagex's CEO would have more info on this himself. And if the upper management at Jagex would email back also to this open letter, and here's what they said. As a studio, we must stay grounded in the mission we all share, and that's making great games for players. Our job is not to use the game as an outlet for our own views, but to craft worlds that serve our players, offering immersion, escape.
Just put the fries in the basket. I don't care about your opinion on what the fries are made of. I don't care about how much sodium is in them. I'm hungry. Put the fucking fries in the bag.
And meaning. That responsibility asks each of us to apply good judgment and to make creative decisions that resonate across a wide and diverse community. And that's what we've tried to do here. So, I think what the management has said here makes sense. Look, I can see where those, pro LGBT people are coming from, claiming that this content, in their opinion, is not divisive. Again, remind you, they lost like 50% of their players already, so maybe what they're saying isn't 100% true. But what the CEO and his team are saying, and they have obviously clear evidence in front of them, I mean, they can look at it from all these changes, and they have come to the conclusion that these things are not helping RuneScape in the long run, and there's no other reason why they would really
Doesn't
make this
help any
decision.
game in the long
Because they
run.
would know 100% that by doing this, that they'll get crucified by their own devs and the journalists and whatnot. They knew that would happen. They're not stupid. However, it's clearly worth it in the long run, in their opinion, for them to push this if it means a healthier and honestly less politically charged future for them. I think what RuneScape has done here
True.
is tough, sure, but it's kind of necessary because games should be escapism from everything, and that's not just the LGBT stuff. I mean everything. Conservative values and flags or LGBT ones, anything real, it shouldn't be there. Because RuneScape, which these people hate to admit, it's not real life. It is not Portland or Atlanta.
Wait, what? This video game isn't real? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I wanted to be able to drive cars in the 1700s. God.
Or San Francisco, guys. It's RuneScape. It's why so many people hate it when these fantasy worlds suddenly cater to real life modern day lingo, because yeah, it takes you out. And if I were to turn RuneScape on right now and just be bombarded with like trans flags and more, that would just tell me that this game's community and its developers are unable to distinguish reality from that of the virtual world, and actually shows that they cannot, under any circumstances, be willing to set aside their clear agenda if it means making their games less political, and that they have to feel validated and approved by everyone, and if they aren't, it's suddenly a hate crime, which it isn't. And frankly, what a lot of these types are proving is that they are acting like children, whether they want to admit it or not. These concepts do divide people, and when your game survives based on its community and its subscriptions, it's always better.
I don't want somebody telling me how I should feel in a video game. I just want them to make a good video game that I can sit down and play and have fun with and have some enjoyment for a couple hours. That's all I want. I don't care about your political views. I don't care about your identity politic opinions. Nobody wants that. You're forcing it on people, and it's obnoxious and annoying. Nobody cares. Put the fries in the bag and give me my food. I don't care. I just want to be able to, kill shit and then go to bed.
To not alienate or divide potential paying customers no matter what you do. Look, okay, this isn't just about RuneScape. It's part of a broader trend too. Companies like
True.
even Target are scaling back their
To be fair, I mean, the amount of people that actually play RuneScape is very minuscule. Like, it's really, yeah, there's still a lot of people that play like OSRS, but, and you might have a small subset of people that play, more modern RuneScape, but in the larger, like, picture, RuneScape doesn't have that big of a following, like, comparatively to other games or other games like, MMO style kind of games. So even if you have a minority within such a smaller community, that minority is very tiny, I'm sure.
Pride merch as well. And other game devs are also dodging the whole woke content because it's nuclear, guys. Come on. However, from what I've seen online, players are pointing out the hypocrisy, saying that RuneScape has Easter bunnies and Santa Claus, but a Pride event is too political. However, these people are actually telling on themselves. You see, Santa Claus is not a political statement. Plus, his existence comes from the base.
To be fair, Santa Claus isn't real either. Neither is the Easter Bunny. And those are national holidays that about 90 to 95% of people celebrate. So let's chill the fuck out and quit trying to throw shade at something else to try and defend your dumbass ideas. These people don't think before they type.
Of St. Nicholas, a Christian figure. Therefore, Santa is by definition based on Christianity as a religion. Sure, Santa is maybe more secular now, but the point still stands. Easter is tied to Jesus as well, which fills that same point, and being gay or being pro-LGBT is not a good comparison.
To be fair, is I see the comment about canceling Christmas too, nothing IRL in game. Christmas itself hasn't been around since like medieval times, but something like it. I don't know the exact term for it. I'm not a historian. I don't claim to know everything, but I do know that they did celebrate something like Christmas. Because it's basically grounded in religious beliefs. So I mean, if you want to get technical, yeah, but in a sense, it is, I still kind of see their point. Like, Christmas is more of like modernly, in a more modern aspect. Christmas is considered a, a real life event, and that shouldn't be in a game. And I can kind of see where they're coming from with that. So I get it.
Comparison. Unless, and again, this is where I think these players are telling on themselves here, which is that they are insinuating that Pride Month and by extension their rainbow flags are actually a form of their own modern religion that is like Christianity. And that them comparing these flags and beliefs to, say, Santa or the Easter Bunny, that proves that being gay is not a religion and nor is supporting Pride Month. I'm sorry, but your sexuality is not equivalent to the religious state of another person. However, in these people's minds, their sexuality and their devotion to things like this have become so intrinsically tied to their own identity, both in real life and online, that they are unable to differ between these two states any longer, and therefore they are as seen as the same thing. So no, they shouldn't cancel Christmas in any game, or Easter even, because they are not the same thing or even remotely the same. Ultimately, these activists can attack Jagex's CEO all they want, but the reality is that their protest will likely just fall on deaf ears. However, I don't think RuneScape is saved or anything like that either. If I had to guess, these players and devs will voice their opinions and try to strong-arm whoever they can to hopefully force this CEO out of his position in the future before long. Now, if RuneScape shares get affected, that could tell a different story. But when I look at the CVC Partners, which owns a big part of Jagex, their shares have actually gone up. So, I mean, it's still too early to tell if RuneScape will get cooked in the long run, but right now, the only real negatives so far are the people who treat their sexuality like their religion that are getting offended by this. But look, I'll keep my ear to RuneScape just to see what's going on there, but as you can see, this looks to be on paper anyways a positive change for the game. Whether it stays this way.
I think another issue in all of this is that a lot of people can look at something and say, hey, I don't agree with that. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to go out of their way to like rage on somebody and say, no, you're wrong. You shouldn't think like that. No, most people just say, yeah, I don't agree with that. Okay, bye. Like, that's normal person's mindset, at least from my experience. So most of these people that have become terminally online, for lack of a better term, they see something they don't agree with and like, oh my God, you're so wrong. Da, 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 da. Shut the fuck up. If you don't like it, move on. Find something else. Okay? Chill out. You are not that important.
Time will only tell, but what do you think about all of this? Is it a good thing that RuneScape has decided to not release new Pride content, or is that a bad thing? Also, what do you think
I
about the
personally just don't
comparison of
give
the
a shit.
Pride flags and such to Christmas and Easter? Is that a valid comparison or not? Let me know in the comments. Thanks as always for being here, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next
one. Alright. That was a good video. I always enjoy those kind of talks. It is kind of interesting to me, and I think it's quite funny, honestly, that all these companies are going away from Pride Month. It's an eye-opener, and to be fair, I kind of seen it coming eventually, because eventually we'd get to the point where, you know, companies would back off of it once it doesn't make them any more money, or once they don't profit off of it anymore. So yeah, I definitely don't see it as a surprise. It is what it is. So, but yeah, I will go ahead and link the video in chat so you guys can check it out if you want. Give it a like.